Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to a brand new episode of the podcast. This week, I was given the wonderful opportunity to be able to catch up with a new reporter here in the city, who is Hannah, who works for Wilshire Life. Now, thank you ever so much to Hannah, who was pleasure enough to join me, and I'm sure there'll be other things that we can collaborate on in the future. But if you did enjoy this episode and would love to see more like it, then make sure to subscribe to the channel. I'll see you very, very soon. And I'm going to hand over to Hannah to explain a little bit more about what she does and why she does it.
I am a reporter for Wilshire Live. It's very, very recent, about a month and a week in, I believe, almost. It will be tomorrow. I've been working there for a while, but we only just launched last week on Tuesday, so brand new. And I do it because I love the fact that every day is completely different, and I meet people that I would never meet if I weren't, if I wasn't able to say, I'm a journalist and I'd like to look into this story, or, I've got the perfect excuse to go up to anyone and start a conversation. And that's what I love about it.
Fantastic. Well, welcome to the podcast. Thank you ever so much for agreeing to come on and letting me grill you a little bit on what you do. And I think we can have a lot of fun. But I mean, I think, and ironically enough, our initial meeting, I forget why I was in Sonder, but you were in Sonder, if I remember correctly, and you were doing a story on Sonder, or like I think it's good to start with that story of how we first met, because I think that's a funny story, and I also am curious on your side of it, because I haven't actually talked to you about this at all. So kind of, if you remember, I think I was meeting Emily and Cleo and etc. for Emily's birthday that day or something. I forget why exactly, where it was, something like that. And I think what were you doing? Okay, let me just go like this. What were you doing in Sonder specifically? Because I think you were writing a report or a story or something related to Sonder, and I can't remember exactly what it was.
I was. So a little birdie told me that they were transforming their third floor into an office space, which I was very excited about, because my Wi-Fi at home is terrible, and I'm constantly looking for new places to be able to work in Salisbury with good Wi-Fi. So I found out about that, and I had to do a piece on it and let everyone know the good news. So yeah, I was essentially just speaking to the owners there and getting some video clips and footage and whatnot. And then I came over to your table, didn't I, to find out if anyone had heard about it and to talk to people about whether or not they were excited, whatnot. And that's how we got to talking, pretty much. You were the nice crowd. I think that we mentioned something. There's someone at your table said that they just become like, what is it? TikTok famous or something.
Emily also decided just basically had a video that had gone, because TikTok's algorithm is very random in some respects. There's some science behind it, but basically you can get a video that can have millions of views when you have technically no right, arguably. She works very hard, lovely girl. I'm not pulling her down in any way, but she had a video that had just, there was a new trend in the UK, and she was one of the first people who did it, and it did really, really well, and really, really proud of her, and well done, Emily, if you're listening, on that. So we were just discussing the fact that it was a standard joke at that time, because, and still is a standard joke now, to be fair, that, she's going to become TikTok famous and all this kind of, malarkey. But, I think the co-working space idea for Sonder is a really, really great one, as I said in the little interview piece we did with you. But also, I think, just so you may not know yet, but also there is and the reason why it's valuable for listeners as well is there's also a small kind of, it's known as the Salisbury office, so they're basically small pods. You can rent them out per day, etc., as well. So that may be another solution for you, while Sonder is still going through the motions in actually getting their third floor to look as amazing as I'm sure it will when it comes to the co-working space as well. So, the lovely Phil over at the Salisbury offices can also help those people who are not looking for long-term agreement leases in regards to offices, and they want to hop in, hop out, that kind of thing. So, Hannah, just for your own clarity as
Yeah,
well.
thank you.
There's another option for you. But yeah, I mean, for me, I think it's an interesting space to be in. I mean, you see, you've only been in Salisbury what month? But I mean, you're yourself actually working as a reporter in Salisbury for a month and a half or so. I mean, how have you found Salisbury as a place to work, and the kind of goings on and that kind of thing? How's that approach? How have you felt Salisbury's kind of, has it welcomed you? Has it been quite challenging?
Yeah,
Like what? Because I'm always curious, because I've lived here my whole life. Right, so
yeah.
and I've been lucky enough to build my business here. I've been lucky enough to be in a position where I can support a lot of local events, a lot of local initiatives, and a lot of local businesses, and a lot of what we do is very, very locally driven. So I have a very tinted spectacle on that, because I'm normally invited down, or asked to come down, etc., because I want to support Salisbury specifically. But how is it? And that's why I always like to ask for newer people, because I don't have that fresh Salisbury feeling ever anymore, because I grew up here. It's been my home. It's been my home for a very long time, and a place very close to my heart. So I mean, how was that kind of first month from the community side of it for you?
Well, yeah, definitely very welcoming, actually. I think it all depends on where you've come from. I've just come from Manchester, which is, worlds apart. A lot of history there, but obviously very industrial. So it's come here with all of these charming old buildings, and there's it's beautiful. And in fact, it's a bit overwhelming how enchanting it is, coming from where I've just been. I spent about 4 years in Manchester, and you get used to that sort of industrial look, and there's very little nature there, and it's just wonderful to be around so much nature here, just surrounded by countryside. And the fact that it is small, I mean, it is city, but I've come from one city which, and they just don't compare. And reporting in Manchester in comparison to reporting in Salisbury, it's so different. Like I was on the street photographing some empty buildings for a high street article that I was doing, and someone came up to me and asked me what I was doing, and it turned out to be the former mayor of Salisbury. It's so random. John Linley, I couldn't believe it. And then he just started walking me around the streets, pointing at buildings, telling me what they used to be. It was such like a golden nugget. I couldn't believe that I just landed this amazing interview, like, opportunity. And then I contacted someone else. I don't know if you know Frog Moody.
Well, I know of Frog Moody in respect to, I know of his name, I know of his work and etc., but we haven't had the pleasure as of yet. So Frog, if you end up listening to this podcast, feel free to reach out. I'd love to meet you, love to have the conversation, because I hear lovely things. But I haven't had the pleasure of actually meeting him properly in that respect. But I'm aware of what he does and how he does it in that respect as well. But yeah.
What I'm getting at is that everyone appears to know each other because it is sort of intimate in that way. John knew Frog, and then Frog introduced me to all of these other people, and in fact, I met his wife before I met him, because I did an article about the haunch of venison, which is obviously, worldwide renowned haunted pub. So I had to do one of those, obviously, for the for the platform. And she's actually writing a book about the haunch, because that's where she fell in love with Frog there. She got engaged in the smoking room downstairs, and she just fell in love with the history, so she wrote a book. And I was contacting a group on Facebook, which I didn't know that Frog was the admin for it, but it was Fishton History group. You're probably familiar with it. So he's the admin for that, and I was posting something on there, and that's how we got to talking. And then I realized that he was the husband of Ruby, who I'd interviewed. And it's just mad how everyone that I met, like, knew everyone else. And that's happened with so many different articles. With the Lost Pub article that I was doing, where I interviewed a guy called Fred Feber, who's an artist that did all of these incredible sketches of the lost pubs of Salisbury. And he knew a guy that had written a book about the lost pubs of Salisbury. I forget his name, Ed Garman. And everyone knows Ed Garman. And it's just crazy how it's so intermingled. There's this network of people that know everything there is to know about Salisbury. And yeah, that just would never have happened really in Manchester. So
I mean, I think it's one of those things. I mean, ironically enough, you probably haven't come across it yet, but you may have, where a lot of the locals call it Salisbury, and that's exactly what we describe it as.
Yes, no, yeah.
That's why we describe it as that, because it is. We're only technically a city because we have a cathedral. That's the only reason why we're a city. Otherwise, we would be a town, right? Because technically, we're the size of a town. We're lovely town. Don't get me wrong, lovely city / town, but we aren't big enough to be a city, arguably, right? The only reason why is we get the status of a city is because of the cathedral. A lovely cathedral, I might add, but as well, especially when you're here for extended period of time, and everyone is everyone, and it's one of those things that once you're in that community and your name gets out there in that community, the community will normally get behind you, especially if you're trying to do community-based efforts, for charity or etc as well, which is really, really great. I mean, that was my next question was going to be, I mean, you kind of sort of already answered it, but do you feel that you'll continue to sort of utilize the Salisbury community to help with your work at Wilshire Life, or is it kind of going to be more targeted around these are the specific stories we need to cover, or do you look for community sort of questions, and or if
That's
you
what's so
if you can answer it?
fantastic about. That's what I really love about my job, and in the particular role that I'm in right now, because there is a ridiculous amount of creative freedom that I have found in no other job. I'm basically given a patch, so my patch is the south of Wiltshire, but I mean that's it. I could present and pitch whatever stories I wanted in the morning, and then whichever ones get greenlit, and then off I go. What's quite fantastic, we're a very small team at the moment. There's three of us, so there's I'm covering the south of Wiltshire. I've got a colleague covering the north, and then we have our head of news and obviously our editor and whatnot. But obviously in the north of Wiltshire, it's all breaking news. There's all of these criminal offences happening every second, sadly, and that's mostly the coverage in the north. And in the south, there's just so little of that going on. Don't get me wrong, it is fantastic, but it just means that our coverage is very different in the south. And so I am doing a lot of very community-based stories. So far, I've been in contact with more sort of charitable organisations because I'm a strong believer in giving all organisations fighting social justice issues a platform in which to continue, working and doing their incredible work to the highest level that they can possibly do, and making people aware of what they're doing and showing them how they can support, etc. So that's my passion. So because that's sort of what's going on the platform right now, there's quite a good mix between what I'm doing and then what my colleague in the north is doing. But occasionally, I think in the over a month that I've been here, there's been one breaking news story that I did, and it was literally just a couple of days ago, where there was an arson attack in a sheltered accommodation in Salisbury, and that was crazy, because you just never hear about that kind of stuff in Salisbury. But yeah, thankfully everyone was fine. By the way, there were 4 evacuees, but no one was hurt.
Yeah, we're very fortunate in the respect to, that clearly crime does happen, right? It happens everywhere, right? Not in the illusion that it doesn't, but we're very fortunate in the respect to it's lower. And from my experience, I personally feel very safe walking around Salisbury at night and etc. It's not. Now, yes, you may argue that's because I'm a guy, etc. So I'm not saying it doesn't happen, right? But it's less of a concern than it would be, say, in a borough of London, perhaps, or etc. Right? In that respect, I mean, I think for me, it's one of those things where because of everyone knowing everyone as well, quite quick news travels fast in Salisbury. Like, I think you'll find that really quickly. News. Oh, I heard from so and so. Oh, I heard from so and so. Oh, I heard from so and so. And it's one of those things where, especially, it's one of those things that you can utilize as a business, especially if you have a good reputation, because it will work for you, as well. But it also has a mixed blessing in some ways, because you can, unfortunately, if you, aren't exactly with the best will in the world, have certain things go wrong and people make mistakes, of course, but you need to be careful with how, it doesn't take very long for you to find out actually, for example, if you were going to do questionable activities in business, that it would spread quite quickly and no one would want to work with you, because they would hear the red flags from XYZ, right? So it's this kind of balancing act, and I think that's where kind of being good and honest and truthful and as transparent as you can whenever you are in a news role or in a similar role to us, in that respect as well. I mean, we have a certain level of credibility that we need to uphold as news advocates or as media companies or as media agencies, because we, to an extent, we have a lot of power, or could have a perceived lot of power, because of the fact that we edit the content, we edit how we approach, and we also can change the language and etc., which can in some ways completely manipulate the story. We may not even necessarily want to do that necessarily, but that might end up being what's happening because we're manipulating it in that respect. I mean, I think, has your work around Salisbury sort of changed how you would approach other areas of the south of the county? Or is it, like just sort of all the same? Because I think for me, from my experience, Salisbury's in this very funny bubble. We're kind of in our own little world when you come into Salisbury, and then like as you slowly go away out, then it goes back to, I guess, the normality world, I guess you could call it. But I mean, how have you found it? Does it differ, or is it the same? I'm really interested because we don't really cover much outside Salisbury, to be honest. We don't. So we're never really outside of that bubble.
Yeah, I don't think that I've done a lot outside of Salisbury yet. That being said, I visited Tisbury yesterday because I don't know if you know, but there's a pub in a small village outside of the village of Tisbury called Swallowcliffe, and there's a pub that's owned by the Top Gear star James May, and it reopened after a lockdown yesterday. So I went to visit it, and it is incredible. Anyone listening, do go, because it is gorgeous. It's absolutely unbelievable. Probably one of the prettiest pubs that I've ever seen in my life. It's craziness. But yeah, I reported on that, and I went about it in exactly the same way that I would do it in Salisbury, I think. But maybe that's lessons that I'm going to learn. Maybe it's because of the nature of the story. It was quite a friendly, uplifting piece. Really, there was nothing very controversial about it. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe ask me in a few months once I've explored the south of Wiltshire a little bit more. But so far it's been really positive. Yeah, not really had any backlash at all. But then, like I was saying, the kind of stuff that I've been reporting on, it's that kind of stuff. I'm not really going to get much trolling or anything, from my Facebook lives or my posts on social or my articles, because it's positive community based information content. Yeah, it's very different to what's happening in the north. I'm sure if I was writing some of those articles, I'd be getting a very different response.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I think it begs quite an interesting question, because I mean, for me, I've always questioned the burden of responsibility when it comes to media, right? Like, as a media agency ourselves, we take quite a lot of pride in the fact that we're very transparent with our opinions and our approach in that respect, because it's very clear if I'm saying video is a good idea, it's because I benefit from it financially. That's the reality. I wouldn't be a very good marketer if I said that, oh no, you shouldn't do video because, right? That would be the counter act of marketing, in that respect. But I think, the question I was going to have for you is what role do you feel journalists and, news advocates and etc. kind of at what level do they have a certain level of, I guess, control or kind of moral, point where they shouldn't tamper too much with the facts, and you shouldn't you can state your opinion as a reporter, but you need to make very clear when it's your opinion, right? I think the question there is like, and that's why I paused, I think the question is, where do you feel the line is between saying to your audience, saying to the people reading, okay, these are the facts of the matter, this is what happened, right? And then this is our opinion, or my opinion, either yours or the company's or the agency's opinion on it. Because I think, for me, it's very important to make the distinction.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. I think that unfortunately it's quite easy to misinterpret some content that you can find online. So it is really important to make that distinction of opinion versus fact. And that's what I strive to do. That's definitely what I know the company are striving to do. It's very important for us, that we're accurate, and that we're sending the correct message to our readers. But when you say the amount of influence essentially that a journalist has, I mean, it can be a bit scary. And you do have to be very cautious, because I mean, depending on what if you're doing court reporting, you've got an incredible amount of responsibility there. This is someone's life that you're writing about. This is just one article in your life, and but it's someone's whole life that this depends on. And obviously there's an enormous amount of regulation around reporting when it comes to court. But yeah, you can feel the pressure, and you just want to make sure that you don't end up sort of opening doors that shouldn't be opened, and making the experience more traumatic for the people involved. Because I mean, that's definitely the opposite of what I think journalism should be. It's not about what's the word? It's not about making the story as
Dramatic.
clickbaity as possible. Dramatic, yeah, exactly. Oh, I almost found it there.
Exciting, explosive.
Oh, it's going to annoy me that I can't find it. Never mind. But you get the idea. It's not about that, and the people that are involved in the article, depending on what angle you've got, it really affects them and their lives, and it can cause some serious side effects to mental health. And I think that's something that us in this position really do need to take into account when we report on certain matters.
I mean,
For sure.
what advice would you give to people who do have the role you have, or are looking to have the idea that I want to be a journalist, I want to be a media professional, I want to work in the space? Because yes, we're a marketing company, yes, we do marketing, but also arguably we do a similar role to you. Different, but similar in the same way. We are helping with the community and the vision and the visualization of, or the community, how you communicate what a business does. In the same way, when we do it for our own marketing, that's how we're communicating what we do. I mean, what advice would you give to people who want to work in the comms space, want to work in the journalism space? But they are, I guess, in some ways cautious, or they're concerned about, what if I do this? What, exactly as we were discussing, the burden of, because I can imagine it can take a toll on you. In the same way as a quote unquote influencer on social media, or someone who has a following, we talk about this a lot, is, it has an impact on you, because people are legitimately looking at every move you make, right? Every post you make. Even if I can't really walk, in most cases, I can't walk through stores without someone knowing me, right? Nowadays, I can't.
Oh, really?
And
Wow.
I'm not saying that to be like, oh, look at me, I'm an egotistical prick. No, it's just because I've built that relationship with so many different people and so many different business owners and people who know what I do and why I do it and how I do it. Every time I go outside, there's a perception. I have to give over a perception. I have to share a perception. I have to, even if I'm my mental state's not there, I still have to give over that perception, because I could run into a client. It's very likely I could run into a client. It's very likely I can run into a friend. It's very likely I can run into a business owner I know and respect. So I guess, I mean, just to reiterate the question, what kind of advice would you give from your experience for people who are looking to go into, maybe it's independent journalism, so them going out on their own, or looking to work for a publication like yourself?
Well, it's a really interesting question, because I'm this is the beginning of my career. In like not long ago, I would have been that person listening to someone on a podcast trying to figure out how I was going to step into this world. So I don't even know if I'm really the best person to ask to answer this, but I'll give it a go. I think just stay true to yourself. The best thing that you've got to sell is you, because there is no one out there like you. So the more authentically you are to yourself, in an interview, the better you're going to come across and the more interesting you're going to be, because you've got something to bring that no one else has. And I think, as you go through interview after interview, just keep reminding yourself of that, and change your pitch. Don't keep it the same, like I graduated in 2020. I was a lockdown graduate, and it was really tough to find employment. Like I did, freelance jobs and whatnot, but I think a lot of us out there really struggled. So I did a lot of interviews, and I think I just had to keep telling myself that, there's I've got a very I've got my story, and I've got my way of writing and talking to people and communicating, and whatnot. So I just need to make sure that that's what I'm selling here, and keep to your principles, because your principles are part of you. Don't don't let people push you to break your moral, what's it called?
Moral compass.
Yeah, moral compass.
Yeah, no, I completely,
Nothing's worth
yeah, I
it.
completely agree, and I think maybe you're very early on, and in that respect, but firstly, well done on getting to this point.
Thank you.
It's last year especially, this year not so much, but there's definitely the waves from last year. It was a very interesting time to live through. And just be existing in, never mind run a business, never mind study or
Absolutely.
etc. And I'm very lucky in the fact that I had a foundation to build off, because I had 3.5 years of a very good economy. I had a lot of time, a lot of support, a lot of people who are behind me and did understand the vision I was trying to do, and still do today. And they're the people who I'm now doing it for. And I'm now doing it for others. I'm not doing it for me. Yes, I'm the brand of the face of the company. Yes, blah 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 blah. But it's actually got beyond me now. And I know for listeners who have listened back to a lot of today's recording session of the last 3 episodes of the podcast, I've talked about that a lot today. But I think it's really important to understand that every person, whether they're a part of a company or whether they're on their own or whatever they're doing, you get to a point where you actually understand that it's not about you specifically. It's about your reader, it's about your customer, it's about your client, it's about your team, it's about what you're doing, it's about who you're doing it for and why, and what your vision is. And you need to check in with that, as we were talking about earlier about your moral compass. You need to check in with why you're doing what you're doing, why are you getting up every day, why do you enjoy it. And there's a lot of it that's not always about necessarily being motivated. It's about I imagine there's days like everyone has it, where you don't really want to do the thing you need to do. I don't want to do the thing, we were just talking about before we started. It's now 6 at night and we're doing an interview. When we both been, I imagine, very busy today, and that we're arguably exhausted, and I'd be like, oh, great, another podcast. Oh, great. And it's just, but the thing is, you do it anyway because you love it. You do it because you believe what you're doing and what you're trying to change and what you're trying to showcase. For my case anyway, is the best that Salisbury has to offer, and what Salisbury has to offer to external but also internal people, locals, etc. as well. And I like to sort of understand how other, especially in media, I like to understand how other media people and other media professionals do think, because it helps me understand how the city's feeling, how is the community feeling about what's happening. And Salisbury is a very special place because you may have not been around when Novichok happened a couple of years ago, but it kind of felt like when COVID happened anyway, for a lot of the community, it was like, well, we've already done this once, kind of thing. Yes, obviously it was a different context, and yes, it was a different thing, but we had kind of already gone through it, and we had just recovered, and we just got back on our feet as a city, and it was like, oh, and we're back again. Okay, great. Fantastic. And it was, I think that's why we have quite a lot of resilience and a lot of community spirit and community pushing on, because we've kind of done it already. And a lot of it is you kind of need to do that in business, you need to do that in life, you need to do that a lot of the time. But I think it's one of those things that you develop a certain level of resilience to eventually. It's like, I was talking to my team earlier today, and we were talking about failure as well. and I know I've also had a podcast about it, but it's about there's no such thing, really, not really. You're either learning or you're succeeding, or a mix of both. So I mean, like, let me ask you, have you got to the point where you felt you would be? So say, you had this plan in your head, I imagine, when you went to uni and you want to be a journalist. Oh yeah, I'm going to go to uni, I'm going to get a job, etc. I mean, are you on that line? Like, where is your kind of progression line? Do you feel like you've got a lot more to offer? Do you feel like you've kind of, got there? Or like, what's next for Hannah?
I certainly hope that I have more to offer, that this isn't the end of the line for me.
Congratulations, you got one job, Hannah. That's it. There you go. You did it. Well done.
Is it over now?
Have I achieved it all?
So I don't know. Yeah, maybe. I mean, you talk about having a plan. Does everyone have a plan? I don't think I had a plan. I think that I fell into journalism by accident. I accidentally started working as a journalist in Brighton. Fell in love with the what it gave me, which was the ability to go anywhere and talk to anyone, with the perfect excuse. And I absolutely loved it, and that's why I went to university and studied it, and continue to love the profession. But I don't think I have a plan. I have hopes that I will achieve certain things, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, anything could happen in the future. I think that sometimes, I mean, absolutely, ambition is really, really important. It is important to have sort of goals that you are working towards, but I don't know. I sort of like going with the flow a little bit. So we'll see.
I think that's an interesting thing, because most of the time females go with the flow a lot more, right? And then guys normally plan out every action a lot more. But I think for either gender watching this or listening to this, try to have balance of both. So if you're like more into I need to plan every move, then get closer to just going with the flow and going with what happens. And then if you're vice versa, go vice versa. Because I think if you have a good balance between the two, then you have a quote unquote, if there was a perfect formula, there's no such thing, but if there was a perfect formula to the goals you achieve or the goals you want, that would be it. Because there's certain things in life you can't control. There's certain things in life that you have to kind of just feel out and kind of have to just go with the flow on. But also, you can kind of stack the odds in your favour if you plan to be at that meeting or those meetings, for example, to meet the right people, or etc. There's also sometimes where I'll just be walking down the street and I'll run into someone who happens to be the mayor of the city. Very good friends with the mayor of the city. That's complete accident. I was friends with her before she became the mayor. Then I found out she was becoming the mayor. And the same with John, as you were talking about earlier. And as you do the event cycle, you'll sort of get to know these people. And you'll get to know the councillors. You'll get to know the people who are quote unquote big players in the city, because it's Salisbury, right? They're also genuinely just nice people, and they're not like, oh, I'm going to sit on my high horse because I'm the mayor of the city and not going to talk to you, you peasant, right? No, they're not like that at all, right? I think that would be a misconception sometimes that they are like that, but genuinely they're people like you and me, they just happen to be also the mayor of the city, or happen to be the councillors of the city, or work for the city council, or with the city, help influence decisions made by city council, for example. I mean, I think that was kind of, for me, that was kind of everything I wanted to cover, really. But I like to add in on the end of the podcast kind of any questions or any topics that you want to throw in. So, do you have any questions for me? Do you have anything you want to throw in for us to discuss for a couple of minutes just before we wrap up?
I do want to clarify that my answer to your previous question was about the long-term prospects in life, not about the day-to-day workings of I do plan my day, like just
No, of course.
my day and tomorrow and the week very well, although I do go with the flow a little bit, because you have to in my job, because you never know who's going to answer and who isn't. Yeah, my answer about going the flow was very much long-term prospects orientated. So like that needed clarifying. promise you, I do plan my days very, very structurally.
I mean, I think we all passively do though, right? Like we might not think about it as like, oh, we're planning it, but we have routines, we have habits, we
Yes,
have,
absolutely.
we have things that we'll naturally do. But would you argue you plan to brush your teeth every morning?
But I don't mean that. I mean,
You
I've
plan your,
planned
yeah, you plan your
many
objectives.
interviews that I
Yeah,
have
you
planned
plan your
during the
objectives.
day.
You plan your objectives. You plan these are the things I'm going to do for work, of course. But, I think from when we're talking long term, when we're talking goals, we're talking, because there's a lot of day-to-day activities that require you to get to a goal, right? Like I'll give you an example of like, I'll use the one that everyone uses, which is getting in shape, because it's one that everyone can relate to, right? You then have to plan in gym time every week, right? Or plan in exercise time every week. Otherwise, you are not magically going to get any stronger, not magically going to become any healthier, right? Of course, there's other aspects that are involved, like your diet and etc., of course, and even sleep. But the principle there is, it's actually, as we discussed just now, a mix of both. It's about planning out what actions can you take, and then being able to go with the flow when it doesn't go to plan, which with video production especially never goes to plan ever. And I imagine it's very similar in what you do as well. It just never goes to plan ever. But I think, is there anything else that you wanted to sort of go over or clarify or talk about specifically?
I don't think so. No, quite pleased with what we've covered. It's been very fun chatting this evening. Slightly
Fantastic.
brain dead, but I think we did all right.
Yes, we did all right, definitely. I think we definitely got through it, which is great. So thank you so much for coming on. Where can people look at your articles, see sort of, talk to you? Maybe they've got a story that they want you to potentially look at and potentially talk to you about. Where's best for people to do that and reach out to?
Well, the best place, well, first of all, you can find all of our content on wilshirelive.co.uk, and you can contact us through any of our social media platforms, be it Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, with any stories or events you think that we should be covering. And please do get in contact, because we're keen to find out what everyone wants us to be covering. So yeah, please don't hesitate.
Fantastic. Any final thoughts, and then I promise I'll let you go and enjoy your evening. When
Final
not
thoughts.
talking to me.
I don't know what could I possibly say except thank you, Salisbury, for welcoming me to this city. I've enjoyed my stay so far, and I look forward to getting acquainted with all of you. Hopefully, Wiltshire Live will be well known by everyone very soon.
Thank you for coming back, ladies and gents. I hope you did enjoy that interview with myself and Hannah. It was slightly, shorter than normal, but I don't feel like it's good to stretch interviews out just for the sake of stretching them. So I hope you took some value from it and got to know her a little bit more. And thank you ever so much, Hannah, if you are listening back, for joining me once again. I'll be back next week with a brand new guest and a brand new episode, and it's going to be exciting, it's going to be fun, it's going to be good. So thank you ever so much for coming back once again, and I'll see you very,